Welcome to Web3 Watchdogs, the podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of Web3 security, compliance, and risk. Join Michael Pearl as he interviews executives from across the Web3 industry to uncover the challenges and opportunities of this rapidly evolving space. Web3 Watchdogs is sponsored by CyVers, your one-stop shop for Web3 security and threat mitigation. CyVers harnesses the power of AI to eliminate hacks, scams, fraud, and compliance challenges in real time, and even before they happen. For more information, visit cyvers.ai. That's CYVERS.ai.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Web3 Watchdogs, the podcast that dives into the depths of everything security, risk management, and compliance in Web3. And before we dive into the interview, just a small request. If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button to make sure that you're getting the latest updates on the future episodes. And if you find the content valuable, please share it with your friends and colleagues. If you have an opinion about anything that me or my guests are saying, please comment in the comment section. And lastly, one small request, please rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. And today, all the way from New Zealand, we have Marc Krisjanous. Marc has over 18 years of experience in the IT security sector in a variety of roles, including IT security architect, IT security manager, and as the security operations center manager for a critical New Zealand infrastructure entity. As a senior security consultant at Confide, Marc is involved with quite a few customers that have complex payment environments. Marc is a qualified security auditor, and we're going to dive into all that. But firstly, Marc, I would love for you to introduce yourself and just to focus the question, what drew you to the area of cryptocurrency? I know that you have a very vast experience in security in general, but what's so interesting about the cryptocurrency side of things when we're talking about security?
Yes, well, I got into the crypto space around about 2020, and I was interested in crypto, especially Bitcoin. And so I started just looking into it, and I bought some crypto, and then I started looking at some of the different platforms, and I looked at staking. I looked at the metaverse, the sandbox and all that, and it all seemed very exciting. And then I joined one platform, and I joined their Discord chat room for the platform. And I thought this was really cool, and there was lots of people, there was lots of talk and activity. And then I noticed that a couple of people over a space of an hour came in and said, hey, I bought some crypto. I'm interested in joining your platform, but I can't really work it out. I don't know what to do. I'm new to crypto. Can someone help me? And instantly, there was 3 or 4, maybe 5 administrators of the platform come in and say, hey, talk to me on private message. We can, I can help you out. I'm an administrator. And I thought, well, this looks a bit dubious, because if you looked at their handles in the chat room, there was nothing about an official admin. And so I said the same thing as well. And I got, 5 admins willing to give me a hand. And I contacted one, and basically they asked me for my seed phrase. And I knew enough about it, being reasonably technically minded and key management, that the seed phrase is pretty important. It's like your password to your bank account. And if you give this to someone, they have access to your wallet. And I thought, well, after all the years of experience I've had auditing key management systems, this is pretty intuitive to me. But if you think about someone who's just come from the banking, managed fund, the fiat world, coming into crypto, they would expect that they'd have the same type of security and regulations and protections in place that they experienced when they were dealing with, Web 2 or the fiat world. And I was quite horrified that no one was really trying to get rid of these admins, the quote admins of these sites. And I was horrified when I found out that people would come in from the general public with money, bought their crypto, loaded up their wallet, came straight into a Discord channel, asked for help, and then all of a sudden their wallet was drained, and they're wondering what on earth happened. And so I thought to myself, well, this is a bit of a Wild West scenario here. And what further horrified me is when I looked at some of these platforms that got hacked, there appeared to be no information security at all. Like, I was monitoring a couple of them, and they would get hacked, all the money would be drained, or the crypto would be drained, or the assets. And then literally it had just appeared that they'd closed shop. No one could contact them because they were on anonymous chat handles. They'd close everything down, and then they'd move and they'd start up another platform, and by the look of it, use the same code base. And off we went. Millions and millions of dollars worth of people's money got poured into it. They got hacked. And so the cycle went about. And I thought to myself, this is just not right, because obviously coming from, nearly 2 decades worth of information security and auditing banking systems and large retail organizations, and that information security was been around for decades. And I was just amazed that this was such a Wild West. So I started to look for security standards for crypto. And I found one, and it was called the Cryptocurrency Security Standard, or as it's known, CCSS. And I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. It's got key management, which is the most important thing for crypto, is protecting the keys. And they seem to be doing quite well, and they've been around since 2015. So I contacted them and I said, hey, I'd love to be an auditor in this, because I really wanted to try and clean up this whole sector, because it was just unbelievably Wild West. And they said, well, they were building the auditors program, but C4, which is the organization or the non-profit that looks after CCSS, they rely on volunteers around the world, and they didn't have anyone who could set up an auditing program. And so I helped them set up the CCSS Auditors Program, and we set that up, and I became the first official auditor. And from there, did some auditing work, and then I was accepted into the CCSS Steering Committee. So I'm basically an auditor, but at the same time, I'm on the committee that ensures that the standard remains relevant. And that's basically how I got into crypto.
So we're going to dive into CCSS, and it's super interesting in a second, but there's just one thing that I wanted to refer to, which I think is really interesting. There's this issue of everyone wants crypto to be as safe and secure as TradFi, as the fiat world, right? But the thing that most platform leaders and, kind of the thought leaders as well are reluctant about is the whole compliance and regulation part, because obviously this diminishes the user experience and the decentralization. And there's a lot of debate that is going on about it. And obviously maybe there's, no other choice but to just kind of copy almost the same features as you have in the TradFi space to the DeFi, CeFi space, because eventually maybe it is what it is, right? That's the way to protect funds and to protect investors and so on. But I think that one thing that is kind of ignored is the fact that the security part of protecting the funds is not something that diminishes your user experience. It doesn't have to come at the expense of decentralization. And actually, platform leaders don't really have an excuse on not to take the necessary precautions with respect to security. That's my take on it. But just, hearing you say that, I just had to say that. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. I mean, the ultimate goal for these platform owners and anyone getting into this space is obviously to profit from it, to grow a business and to profit. And if you want to profit in this space, then obviously my understanding would be is that the more people, the more profit. So if you're trying to encourage the general public to get into this space, you need to be aware that they're coming from the traditional finance world where they are protected. If they lose the password to their bank account, well, they can phone someone up and someone resets their password and they have access to their bank account. In this space, if you lose access or if you forget or lose your seed phrase, it's game over. So, you may have a couple of Bitcoin in one wallet and you lose your seed phrase. Well, kiss that goodbye. So in terms of security, then obviously the general public is expecting that these platforms are as secure as their bankers, and that they take information security as seriously as their bank or their managed fund or whatever. That's the solid expectation of people coming into this space. So I do think there is a bit of a problem when it comes to these platforms focusing more on vanity metrics. How many users have we got? How much profit are we raking in? How much market penetration have we got? They're looking at the vanity metrics instead of actually saying, well, maybe if we make ourselves more secure, then we wouldn't be known as just the Wild West of scams by the general public.
Yeah, for sure. So you've mentioned the CCSS standard, and I would like to dive into that. By the way, fun fact, the way I understand it, you were the one to conduct the first CCSS audit, right? If I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. So once I helped them establish the auditors program, I became the first auditor because basically I was there and I knew what to do. So I established that. It's based on the fundamentals or methodology of PCI DSS. So it's the standard itself and the audits and certification progress is quite rigorous. And the first audit was Fireblocks, because Fireblocks is, it's the largest and most used wallet infrastructure provider. They'll obviously offer other services, but at their heart, they provide key management functions. And they had always, for years and years, wanted to become CCSS certified because they believed in the standard. And so they were first cab off the rank. And I was lucky enough to be in a position where I was the only auditor in the world. And Fireblocks were well keen to be audited. The thing about CCSS is that it's a global standard, meaning that anyone, anywhere in the world can use the standard and secure their systems without worrying about their local regulatory requirements or jurisdictional requirements. It's a key management standard at its heart. It is, I would refer to it as being open source security standard, in that anyone, anywhere in the world can contribute to the standard. And if you believe that there is something missing or something can be better improved, all you have to do is contact C4, which is the certification body, and your suggestions will come up to the CCSS Steering Committee, which is I'm a member of. And if the requirement or the suggestion sounds good, we'll put it in. And we've proven that with the latest release of CCSS, which is version 9, which is coming out next week. There's over 1,000 individual changes from the current version of the standard to version 9. And almost the most important requirements and feedback we got was from the community around the world. We had a process where anyone in the world could submit suggestions and comments, and we went through the whole lot, and we applied the ones that we believed were relevant and actually really good ideas. And we started in July of this year looking at version 9, and we got so much feedback from the community that it's only now in December of 2024 that we're actually in a position to release it, because the feedback was so good. The suggestions were so good that we had to actually put in so much, and that's the reason why there's over 1,000 individual changes to the standard.
So we're going to talk about version 9 in a second, because I know that there are quite a few interesting things there, and we received a sneak peek into the most interesting changes. But maybe before that, can you give me like one or two examples on what do you actually check and verify in the auditing process? Just one or two examples just to understand, what's the experience of a company? What does a company have to amend, have to fix, have to enhance in order to be CCSS certified?
So CCSS at its heart is a key management standard. So one of the first things an auditor will do is that they will ask for the key inventory. So what we call in version 9, the key material inventory. So if someone who wants to become CCS certified can't produce an inventory of their most critical keys, then we know that there's some work to be done, because one of the first things you need to know is to understand where your keys are, how many keys you have, the criticality of your keys, and who has access to the keys. As we saw with FTX, when the first interim report was released, by the bankruptcy team that went in there. They said that literally there was no security on the keys. So the keys, the private keys to the wallets, were on file servers that anyone in the organization could access. And we're talking about wallets that had billions and billions of dollars worth of funds in them, and they had zero protection against their private keys. I mean, if you want to work out what not to do in terms of protecting your keys and your customers' funds, then you just look at the case studies that come out with FTX in terms of their security. I've written a few articles about their lack of security, and it's quite horrifying. If an entity wants to become CCSS certified, they need to have a very good understanding of their keys. Not the keys that are generated for one transaction, right? When automatically, you deposit funds into an account, into a wallet, or into your exchange account, a wallet address is generated just for that. We're not talking about those. We're talking about the cold wallet keys. We're talking about the keys that are very critical to the organization. And then if you can produce a key inventory, that's when we start looking at your key management processes to understand how you're actually dealing with keys through the entire life cycle. For example, how do you create the keys? What is the environment that you create the keys in? For example, do you use a secure room? Is there any chance that eavesdroppers could look in while you're doing a key ceremony? The security of the facility itself, the CCTV, locked doors, fobs, access controls. We're looking at the devices that create the keys, the Trezor devices or your laptops, whatever. Have they been patched? Are they secure? Are they air-gapped? So forth. And then once the keys are created, we look at, well, how do you securely transfer those keys to the environment in which they are used? Because sometimes you create the keys and they've got to be transported somewhere. So we look into that. We look into the security of the key management systems themselves. For example, you might be using an HSM. We'll look at the configuration standards of the HSM to see what you're using there, access controls, patching, the works. And then we look at the signing environment as well, or the environment where the keys are used. How is that secure? How is, when the key is being decrypted and is going to be used for signing, how is that process that's using the key protected against other rogue processes within the same environment? And we look at the security of keys at rest. Are they encrypted at rest? Are they stored, protected? We look at the backups of keys. How are you actually managing your backups? Who has access to the backups? Are the backups encrypted? Are the backups on media such as paper, metal, or are they stored electronically? Are they in Faraday bags? Are they protected against electromagnetic pulses? All types of stuff around the backup of keys. Then we look at incident response, or what we call key compromise management, where a key is found to be compromised in some shape or form. We'll look at your processes around those. We'll look at how you respond to an incident regarding your keys, how you communicate to the stakeholders, and how you recover. Then we'll also look at how you destroy keys. There must be some sanitation process. How do you destroy a seed phrase that's been stamped onto metal? How do you destroy an electronic copy of your seed phrase or your keys? What's the processes around those? So that's generally what we'll look at. So as I mentioned before, it's quite a rigorous audit because we truly believe that CCSS provides the guidance that you need in order to provide as much security around your keys as you possibly could have. And then CCSS also has operational requirements around how do you actually protect the key management system? How do you monitor for attacks? Do you monitor things such as your audit logs for inconsistencies and processes? Your access controls. How do you know if someone's got broken into your system? What happens if someone leaves? It's a key custodian. Do you have a process to remove their rights from the keys? How long does it take to actually remove the rights from the keys? As I mentioned, it's very rigorous, and normally an audit would take between, if an entity is pretty good with their key management, probably 2 to 3 months from start to finish. If they're very, very good, you probably could look at maybe 1.5 to 2 months.
Wow, interesting. You know, the issue of monitoring and obviously the response is something that we deal with extensively at CyVers. And we're going to talk about that in depth in a second. But I just wanted to ask you kind of a heresy question, right? If I'm a company, what's in it for me? Why should I go through all these lengths and, invest all this time and money to obtain a CCSS standard? What's the value, the benefit? I have to focus on my business. I have to focus on maybe on my security. Why should I seek a certification in the first place?
Well, at the very fundamental level, you should be focused on security, because if someone hacks you, it's game over. Not only from losing your customers' funds, but from a brand perspective as well. I seriously doubt any organization that suffers a major hack can recover time and time again. I mean, there are some cases where entities or platforms get hacked more than once. Amazingly, some of them still keep on going for some reason, but on the average, your brain suffers considerably. The trust is gone. So at the fundamental level, security or the protection of the key should be first and foremost. It's not hard. You can follow CCSS without actually certifying in the process. You don't have to go for a third-party audit. You can just what they call align to the standard. So you can use the standard. It's free. It's open source. It's there. It's publicly accessible. You use the standard and you don't even have to be audited. So it's there to be used.
So it's kind of like a checklist for best practices.
Absolutely. 100%. And really the benefits of CCSS is again, it's a global standard. And it forms around the fact that if you have a global standard, there's a concept called harmonization, whereby the standard is not restricted to a jurisdiction. It's not restricted to anything. It can be used anywhere in the world by anyone. And so what that means is when you look at someone, say, in India, who provides wallet services or so forth, and they're CCSS certified or such as Fireblocks, anywhere else in the world, they can look at Fireblocks certification and they know instantly what level of quality their security program is. They don't have to understand the local laws and regulations of Fireblocks where they reside. They don't have to understand particular specifications of a requirement based on the security standard. It's completely open, it's transparent, and it crosses all borders. So we call that harmonization, and that comes through by using a global standard. ISO, which is, as you know, been around for decades and decades. I think ISO have something like 30,000 standards, everything from electrical sockets through to how do you measure temperature, the whole gambit. Anything that you could think of in your life, there's an ISO standard for it. And that is another international standard organization whereby world countries come together to create standards that are used in countries all over the world. There's a common agreement, there's a common approach, it's standardized. And that means that other countries can communicate with other countries and they all understand each other. They all understand if you're certified in this, they understand exactly what that means and they can look at it in such a way.
I think that the missing part here is to get the day-to-day user to be aware of the importance of the standard. And I think that, again, in my vision, I would see, a trader going into a website of, let's say, a centralized exchange and actually making sure that they are CCSS certified. And then they would know that their funds are safe. I think that, there's a long way to go with education. And if we can help with that in some way, then we should definitely, take part of it. But at the end of the day, I think that when we get to the point where your, moms and pops users are going into a website and making sure that they're CCSS certified, that's when we know that the industry has actually, made a giant leap forward.
I tend to think of it more as businesses checking their service providers or who they deal business with and that they're certified. If you think about it, do you know if your bank is ISO 27001 compliant? Do you know if your bank is SOC 2 compliant? Do you know if your bank is certified and regulated and meets all the regulatory requirements? I mean, for me personally, I don't even know if my bank's ISO 27001.
Well, they do put it on their websites. So I guess that there is some marketing value in it. So I think that we can definitely get to that in the crypto space. And I think that in the crypto space, the fact that people should be more savvy about how, their funds are managed and secured, I think that it's even more important than, the banking system, because there is no regulator that is going to make sure that they're actually certified.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. If CCSS becomes publicly known as kind of like a stamp of assurance or a stamp of security, like in the Web 2 space where you have the certificates or little stamps on websites to say, they belong to they've got a stamp of security or a stamp of safeness. There is some initiatives out there around that, but the crypto platforms and the bigger exchanges and so forth haven't really gotten on to that yet. But it would be fantastic if CCSS becomes publicly known. To be honest with you, if an organization, when an organization becomes certified in CCSS, they receive a unique badge with their certification number on it. So that is basically a stamp of endorsement that they've obtained a certain level of information security robustness, that they could rest assured that these people take information security seriously. And that's the other thing that we've found too, being on the committee, the steering committee, is that there are a lot of scam sites out there that have fake CCSS certified stamps on them, and we kind of like think, well, that's a great endorsement that they actually care about CCSS enough to put it on their scam sites. But obviously they've got the other ones. But it is quite heartening to see that they use that as a stamp for the general public exchanges, scammy sites. So no, I completely agree with you. It would be fantastic if CCSS becomes that publicly aware. Right now, we're pretty much focused on ensuring that businesses can work with other businesses and get assurance that, this organization takes information security seriously, because, you may be ISO 27001 compliant. Well, that's great. But if you look at the standard, the information security controls are, they're designed for, I hate to say it, the Web 2 space, right? There's nothing about blockchain state monitoring. There's no controls around that. There's no controls around smart contract auditing. Yes, you can apply, secure coding techniques and so forth, but it's not tailored to the Web3 space. And in fact, this is one of the shortcomings of these ISO 27001 certifications in these spaces, is that, baseline security controls are there, but in terms of, are you actually monitoring blockchain state? Are you actually ensuring that your smart contract audits are done? All that type of stuff. It's not there. And that's where CCSS comes in. You may be ISO 27001 compliant. You may be SOC 2, but that's only doing the baseline stuff. If you put on CCSS on top of that, those baseline security certifications, then that's when you truly get into, the more finer grained security controls that the Web3 space uses, right? Needs the architecture of the Web3.
It's a great segue to discuss V9, and I wanted to ask more specifically about the monitoring. As you mentioned earlier, you've added monitoring of wallets as a prerequisite for obtaining the certification. Now, the question is, and that's something, obviously, we are big on monitoring. That's what we do. That's our bread and butter. But oftentimes you hear the answer of, it's okay, I have my code audited, and I don't really need to monitor my wallets 24/7. So I wanted to ask you, what's the reason for adding monitoring as a prerequisite for defining a crypto management company as secure?
No, I mean, that's a good question. And what we did, because the CCSS Steering Committee is constantly looking at new attack vectors, we're looking at new technologies and seeing, what could be attacked with these new technologies. For example, in CCSS version 9, we remove the wording around the private key, right? Because you've got MPC now, and you've got other technologies that are accompanying that don't fit the normal 2015 version of what a private key is. So we've addressed those types of things. But the interesting thing about monitoring blockchain state, which is, you could put it as wallet monitoring, but we tend to say, well, it's just more than just wallet monitoring. It's the blockchain state itself. Wallet monitoring is included in that, obviously. But what we did is a number of us on the steering committee, we are actually seeing a lot of your own CyVers own alerts coming through, especially on crypto, Twitter or X now, and also LinkedIn. And we saw a lot of times that you guys are actually proactively alerting the community on attacks that are happening right now, real time. And you were trying your hardest to communicate with some of these platforms, and some of them didn't even know what was going on, and it took them hours and hours to actually work out that they were under attack, where people such as yourselves actually found out literally the time something started going on the blockchain state. So we were looking at these things, especially from your organization, these alerts, and we were going, well, you were detecting things that were happening before the platform even, their own current security controls picked up. Maybe they were, but there was nothing, there was no process around people actually 24/7 being alerted and doing something about it. So we thought, well, this is actually quite important that you could really, really proactively detect in real time some type of suspicious activity. So it was, as I mentioned, based on a lot of alerts that you guys were actually sharing with the community, and we really thought that was a fantastic contribution to the community security. So that's when we started looking at this requirement, and we really thought that this was an important security control to put in place, and that it would really help towards the overall information security monitoring tools that are out there. So we put it in. It's at CCSS level 3. It talks about blockchain state, both confirmed and unconfirmed as well. So there are situations where, for example, the mempool in certain blockchains, certain blockchains and mempools, you can monitor the state there, where you could actually see API calls that shouldn't be there, or function calls that shouldn't be there, or whatever. So the requirement covers confirmed state and also unconfirmed state. And we believe that there's enough tooling options out there that this type of requirement can be supported.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think the response is also important, right? Because at the end of the day, when you have this combination of alerting in real time, obviously monitoring and then alerting in real time, attached to a healthy response mechanism that can be either automated or manual, depends on the type of the company. At the end of the day, you can protect yourself from, let's say, 90% of the hacks. There are other tools as well that we also work with that are more preemptive, that can give you this kind of 100% protection with respect to some threats that can even be prevented before they actually happen. But definitely the bread and butter is monitoring and a proper response mechanism. I totally agree with you on that.
Well, I mean, if there's any other type of controls that are detection controls that can be put in place, then obviously we're always open to suggestions from the community about if there's further requirements that we could put in place to even make the platform even more secure than what it currently is. It's evolving. Version 9, when it comes out next week, is going to be some pretty amazing requirements in there, and we really truly believe that it's a significant uplift from 8.1. I mean, 8.1 is really fundamentally trust this. You can really rest assured or gain some high level of assurance that this organization is taking information security seriously with version 8.1. Version 9 lifts that up and enhances it to really start drilling into some additional robust controls that weren't really needed a couple of years ago, or like from 2015 when the standard was created. We're adding on top and enhancing each version as we release it. So it's exciting times. Obviously, when we release version 9.1 or whatever, there'll be some more requirements in there as well. I mean, we basically, like I said, we started in July looking at the feedback from the community, and it only took us now, December, when we actually had to cut off and say, draw a line in the sand and say, basically, hey, we need to get this out. It's really good. There's a lot of new, really cool stuff in here, but we just can't keep on, processing the stakeholders, the feedback from the community, because we might never release it. So we drew a line in the sand. We said, right, December, out it goes. And then when version 9 is released, we've actually got a 3-month review period. So we're going to set up feedback form. So anyone, anywhere in the world, can basically say, hey, you missed out on this, or hey, this actually doesn't sound right, and you need to improve it, or you missed out on this requirement, or whatever. They can submit it. And the steering committee is going to spend the next 3 months reviewing it. And so the next version after 3 months, there'll probably be even more requirements, and there are more changes, or the fact that, this requirement that you've just added doesn't make sense, and we'll change it.
Yeah, we started the conversation from you mentioning that you got dragged into this world of cryptocurrency, actually from identifying scams, right? Going into forums and basically identifying fake admins that wanted to steal someone's keys. Obviously, not much has changed in that sense. Actually, the scammers have gotten more sophisticated, but in terms of protecting the users, unfortunately, not much has changed for the best. And I wanted to ask you, are there any standards, or is there any plan to introduce standards with respect to some measures to protect users from scams and fraud? Because there are ways to go about it, except for education and obviously monitoring the conversations, right, that you see in the social media and in the forums. There are some technological measures that can be implemented to protect users, primarily with respect to, let's say, pig butchering. Pig butchering is one of the biggest problems that we see right now. Obviously, it's a code name for many different types of frauds and scams. But recently, we got very deep into that, and we saw that there is virtually no solutions until we actually introduced one. And now we're working with quite a few exchanges on helping them to protect their users and to identify pig butchering related wallets and networks. But is there any standardization with respect to that? I know that there are some regulatory moves, like the APP fraud legislation in the UK coming from the FCA. Is there anything with respect to standardization?
Yeah, I mean, what's come out of the UK instead of the APP, it's the first one in the world. They're leading the charge, the UK, on introducing this. It seems to be really good, because even in New Zealand, on the news, literally every month or less, there's some person that's lost their life savings through pig butchering. So anywhere in the world, everyone is impacted by this type of scam. And there's really no international standard that encompasses this, that tries to say, here, here's a set of requirements and a framework for actually protecting yourself against these types of scams. There's a whole lot of other things like FATF. They're basically focused fully on terrorism financing, AML, and so forth. I mean, they're incredibly powerful. And, if a country ends up on their grey list because they're not doing AML too well, or they're letting a whole bunch of scammers launder their funds through their country, being on the FATF grey list is actually pretty bad. You can really suffer as a country financially in terms of your relationships with other countries. So that's a powerful control or tool to use. On the security side, obviously, you've got CCSS, you've got the ISO 27001 or the ISO 27000 series to help in terms of security. There are other types of things like non-profit or for-profit organizations around the world that are trying to help educate people against these scams, or like pig butchering. In New Zealand, we've got NetSafe, and they're very proactive. So they're always trying to educate the New Zealand public on these types of scams. They partner with organizations around the world to try and work out what's going on, how can they contribute, how can they share information. That's a really good thing. There's other ones like the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. They're huge. And I've met the gentleman that actually started that, and he's incredibly passionate about trying to stop some of the, just stop or greatly impact on the scammers. So, for example, NetSafe in New Zealand, they've partnered with the Global Anti-Scam Alliance. These partnerships, they form, and then that adds more value, and they share information and so forth. So I think there's a lot of stuff being worked on. So lots of initiatives around the world, from regulatory right through to people going to retirement villages and educating people on how to avoid pig butchering and these types of scams.
Yeah, that's very important. So, Mark, before we conclude, actually, I have so many more questions for you, but unfortunately, we're out of time. And maybe we'll do another session after the V9 is published, and maybe we'll focus on some other issues that I wanted to discuss with you. But before we conclude, perhaps you can refer the audience to where we can follow you, where we can read more about CCSS. Where can companies actually read about this checklist that we talked about and how to implement it?
Sure. I mean, you could look me up on LinkedIn. Just search for Marc Krisjanous. I believe I'm the only Marc Krisjanous in the world. So you probably only find one on LinkedIn. If you find more than one, please try and contact me about that, because that's not good. So LinkedIn's probably the easiest way to get hold of me. And from there, just contact me and I can put you, in touch with whatever person you need to, the steering committee, C4 and so forth. If you just go to Google and type in CCSS crypto, CCSS, the acronym, is used in other sectors. So just type in CCSS. So 2 C's, 2 S's for sugar, just mindful of my New Zealand accent, and space crypto, and you'll hit on the C4 websites and so forth. But definitely contact me via LinkedIn and I'll be happy to help you.
Perfect. Mark, really appreciate you coming. Before we finish, guys, just remember to subscribe, to hit the recommend button to all your friends, to rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app. And that's it, Mark. Thank you so much.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
Web3 Watchdogs is sponsored by CyVers, your one-stop shop for Web3 security and threat mitigation. CyVers harnesses the power of AI to eliminate hacks, scams, fraud, and compliance challenges in real time, and even before they happen. For more information, visit cyvers.ai. That's CYVERS.ai.